Joining fields, taking over. No one can deny we're queens in our own rights. Flag or fleet, we're ruling the game. Turning heads, yeah, we're making our own name. Living free, we're breaking the mold. Unapologetic, we're standing bold. Every picture we post, it's a story untold. We're inspiring souls, watch us unfold. Watch us unfold.
Welcome back to Rooted in Your Confidence, the podcast where we have real conversations, empowering conversations with women who are owning their space in male-dominated industries. I'm your host, Samantha Kay, and today I am speaking with one of the women whose stories is all about strength, resilience, and self-empowerment. My guest today is Elicia Ybarra, a martial arts self-defense instructor and founder of Pretty Hands, Hard Punches. She has earned black belts in both Taekwondo, and she's going to tell me how to say this, Hapkido? Hapkido.
Hapkido.
Hapkido. See, she's already helping me out. And through her own experiences facing discrimination, manipulation, and abuse, she's turned the challenges into mission to help other women reclaim their power. In today's episode, we talk about the power of self-defense beyond physical protection and how to tap into your confidence when the world tries to shake it and what it means to take up space unapologetically. This is the conversation about standing firm in who you are, because confidence isn't just about how others see you. It's about how you see yourself. Let's talk about it. Elicia, welcome, welcome, welcome. And if you would like to, tell us a bit about yourself. I know I tried, but I know you can do it better than me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elicia Ybarra. I am the owner and founder of Pretty Hands, Hard Punches, and I'm a lifelong martial artist. I began training at the age of 6 years old. I spent most of my adolescence and early adulthood teaching martial arts and really engulfed in a male-dominated industry where pretty much everyone I worked with was all men. At that time, women didn't really train in martial arts in the way we see today. So I, even as a young girl, was often the only girl sparring, was the only girl in tournaments. And I spent most of my time feeling very alone and isolated because I worked with all men. And even though at a young age, it didn't feel as much of a difference, as I hit puberty and into my early adulthood, I began to really notice the difference of being a young woman and being a young girl turning into a young woman and the type of discrimination I began to feel. All of a sudden, things that I was praised for as a young girl, you know, having that assertiveness, having that opinion, having opinions, being aggressive in the way that I sparred. As I hit puberty, that became very much less attractive. And I stopped hearing things like, wow, go for it, go for your dreams. And I started hearing things like, men are not going to find that attractive. Men are not going to want to date you. You know, boys aren't going to think that you're cute or feminine if you do martial arts and you fight in this way. And so I'm extremely excited to be here to talk about the other side of being a young woman trying to navigate male-dominated industries in a place like martial arts where almost all of it is dominated by men specifically.
Wow. Well, I'm excited for you to be here because I want to talk about all the things. I took a self-defense class maybe about a month ago, and I learned some things, and I'm excited because, you know, just to embrace it. And I went as far as to really think of how we as women, when I took that class, how we as women run away from things. We don't face it. And I know with what you do, you teach women how to face any circumstance, how to be direct and how to show up, all the things that the world has told us that we should not do, and how we should wait to be liked, loved, and hopefully seen as a beautiful human being when we're already beautiful inside. So tell me, what first drew you to martial arts?
I was obsessed with the Ninja Turtles from the time I was 3 years old. Donatello was my favorite. He does what's called the bow staff, which is a really long stick. And I wanted to be a ninja. I remember my mom being like, do you want to be a dancer? Like, I'm going to buy you a choo-choo. And me being like, no, Mom, I'm a ninja. So I stole all my brother's Ninja Turtle stuff and I put it all in my room and I begged my parents from a very young age to put me in martial arts. And so at 6 years old, they enrolled me in my first Taekwondo studio and I became a very ambitious young woman at that age. I knew from a very young age that my goal in life was to open and run my own martial arts studio. I wanted to be the head instructor. Like, I wanted to be the instructor that I saw and I looked up to in my own school. And as I went through, going to competitions, getting more serious about speaking, I started to face adversity and discrimination. And it became less about what I could provide as a martial arts student and instructor and more about what I could do for the men that were in charge. And at the time, I was 13, 14 years old. I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't understand things like gender roles. I didn't understand things like femininity. I didn't really understand those constructs that we learn as we get older that we're taught, you're a young girl, you're a young woman, you fit into this box. I never fit into that box. I was like, I will beat the box up and then I'll beat you up for trying to put me in the box. And once I hit puberty, I really started to see the difference that I was being treated versus my male counterparts that I had trained with for several years at this point. And I knew I didn't understand it, but I knew that there was a difference between me and my male counterparts in martial arts. I just didn't, at that age, at 13 years old, I didn't understand what it was.
Yeah, 13 is that pivotal role and pivotal stage in your life where you're just trying to figure things out and see where you stand. And of course, we as women, we see pretty little girls over here. We see the tomboys, we're labeled from the start, from the very start. You always want to be a lady. I remember my mom always telling me, you didn't want your knees all scuffed up. Don't be on your knees. I used to play jacks, but I couldn't play jacks. It's funny. I was just talking about this the other day. Couldn't play jacks. She was like, do not get on your knees. You're going to get your knees all scuffed up. So that role in that box that they put us all in, how did you know? For me, I didn't know, not until I was an adult, to punch through it. What made you punch through it?
I had goals and ambitions that I knew exactly from a very young age. Like some kids are like, I wanted to be an astronaut, right? And, they work their whole lives. For me, it was, I wanted to be a master in martial arts. Like I wanted to be an expert. And so I struggled with the construct and the binds of femininity for a very long time in the martial arts industry. And I faced a lot of abuse because I wanted to be the instructor and the owner. And the men that were in charge, my instructor, he was 24 when I was 16. And he knew what my goals were. And there was a lot of manipulation and coercion that went into place and abuse disguised as making me stronger in my younger years. And for me, it was just the idea that just keep swimming, just keep swimming. This is my goal and I'm going to do what I have to do to get there. And that was both a blessing and a curse. The blessing was that now at 36 years old or 35 years old, I am doing exactly what I had always wanted to do. I'm living my childhood dream, maybe not in the exact way that I wanted, but I'm out there. I am a master in Taekwondo. I am teaching martial arts and I am teaching self-defense. But the curse was that it made me extremely vulnerable to abuse and all types of abuse and manipulation because the men that were in charge were used to everyone doing what they said. And even I was trained from a very young age that you listen to your instructor, you listen to your master, you do what he says. So when I turned 13 and I became very serious about competitions, my 21-year-old instructor at the time began grooming me for his own sexual gratification. And it had nothing to do with me and my goals to open a school. But he used that in order to keep me within the grounds of what he wanted me to for. And so by 16, he was having sex with me. He was 24 at that time. And he manipulated and coerced every aspect of my life throughout my early teenage years in order to keep me where he wanted me for his own gratification. And that really did more damage than anything else I had ever endured, because it took my identity and the things I loved about myself and it flipped it upside down, and it manipulated it. He manipulated it to be what he wanted out of a young woman, out of, a very inappropriate aged girlfriend, is for lack of a better word. And so for me, it was really just, I didn't blame the martial arts. I blamed him specifically. I didn't realize that abuse in the martial arts industry was like system wide, that it happens all the time in our world. I didn't know those types of things. At that point, I had never met a female martial artist, or a female black belt, I should say, that wasn't like married to an instructor, or like in that realm where they were dating the instructor or the owner of the school. I had only ever met female black belts that were married to the martial arts instructor in charge. So I had never seen anyone like me. I had no one to look up to in that way. So I looked up to the men and I did what I was told by them. And being a young woman and trying to find my identity and struggling with wanting to be girly and feminine and beautiful and gorgeous, and still wanting to maintain that, tomboy, tough assertiveness that I had always had ingrained in me. It was a struggle. It was a struggle even before the abuse. It was a struggle during the abuse, and it was a struggle after the abuse. And it wasn't until my mid-30s that I became comfortable with being strong and beautiful.
Wow, you've just said a mouthful, let me tell you, because in a good way, because what you said, it happens to so many women in different areas of their professional lives. We take on what we feel society chooses for us to be. Then we want to be feminine, we want to be gorgeous, but we don't feel that we can show up truly as ourselves, meaning being able to just say, hey, I'm here, whether I am, for me, wearing steel toe boots, or for you, knocking in boxes, blocks, knocking people down. So to me, that is a win, that you were able to, even through all the challenges and through the circumstance, you were still able to become confident enough, because it takes so much courage to do that. It takes so much courage to dig deep in yourself and to push past that in order to say no. So kudos to you. Thank you for even sharing your story. I appreciate that. But what gave you the courage to shift, to change? Okay.
And this is just my opinion, but I think men often get in power so that they can do the same things that happen to them to other people, and get away with it. And I think women try to get in power so that they're not abused anymore. And I think that often happens. Like, one of the reasons I became a master in Taekwondo was so that no one could ever use that over my head again. Well, I'm your master. I'm your grandmaster. Do what I say. Because now I'm like, well, I am also a master. We're equal. You're not going to tell me what to do. But this instructor specifically, I think that in martial arts, specifically in martial arts, instructors are put on a pedestal where they can do no wrong. They are pillars in the community. They are pillars in society. They're given gratification for everything they do, and everything they do wrong is usually swept under the rug, because we are taught as students in martial arts to listen to your instructor. He knows best. In favor of their opinions, to disregard your own uncomfortability, because in martial arts, you're often uncomfortable. You're doing more physical activities than you're used to. And I think someone like this grandmaster, and even the instructor that I worked with before, I think that ego gets to them and they feel like they can do no wrong. And I think that happens a lot in male-dominated industries, because they were treated shitty. So now they're treating the other people shitty, and that is a perk of the power.
I think you're 100% right, but I think both men and women do it depending on if they've done the work on themselves. I had a boss, she was a woman, and that's what she did. Because I wanted to interview her when I started this, because I was so proud, this woman who's never done this, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, can I interview you? I just want to. She was like, well, I don't have time, But let me tell you, I think women have it too easy now. I struggled. I faced this. She actually said out of her mouth that she wanted other women to struggle, to have the pain, go through all the challenges she faced so that they could understand. And I thought to myself how sad it was that you would want other women to suffer, because I think that we as women in these male dominated industries, we suffer more than we actually understand or speak to because of what society has told us to be.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I was watching something on TV recently, and this woman, she was the chief. First of all, let me tell you, I am a sucker for a medical show any day of the week. And I was watching it, and the woman, she was the chief of surgery or whatever. And she told a young aspiring intern that, listen, if you want to make it, you can't be the sad person. You can't be vulnerable to people. Meaning, if you got, she asked her specifically, if you got hurt, if you got in an injury, would you come to this hospital? Because I wouldn't want people to see me naked. I wouldn't want people to see me hurt. So that's what society tells us, that we have to be someone else as women in order to be in these roles that we have in these male dominated industries. So your instructor was doing just what freaking society says. And especially, what do you think about culturally? I mean, because it's a different culture. So what do you think?
Culturally, I had no power at all. You know, Taekwondo is Korean, and culturally, women don't have a lot of say in Korean culture. And I found out, 3 years into this relationship, as I began to get disillusioned and as I began to realize, that I was never going to get where I wanted to be. Although I wouldn't admit it to myself at the time. I was like, I just got to keep trying harder, because one of the things people in this type of industry, right, in martial arts, one of the things that my instructor did to me was, he kept keeping the carrot just out of reach. So if you just try harder, you just do better. And that was fully ingrained in me. I internalized anything that went wrong. And I made sure, like, how can I do this better? How can I be better? And at the end of it, what I found was that I was not being trained to be a martial arts owner and a martial arts school owner, or the master of my own martial arts school. I was being trained to be the wife of a school owner, which is very different than what I was under the impression that I was going through and I was enduring all of this abuse for. I was under the impression I was going through and I was enduring this so that I would be an equal partner with the man I was going to call my husband. He was not training me for that. He was training me to silently, submissively, and humbly support my husband in their family goals. And he said that to me at the end of all of this, when I found out that one of my co-instructors was making $5 more an hour than I was, because he looked the part of the head of a school, and I was like 20 years old and I looked 15, and I didn't look the part. Even though I had the experience, I didn't look like I should be a head instructor. And finally, this grandmaster lost his patience with me, and he told me, "You think you're going to be the owner of a school, Ely? Your job is to look pretty and sell contracts. You bring the men into the door, you get them to sign up, but you're not going to be the one that teaches them." He said that I was more fuckable than anything. And the only reason a man would ever train for me is to have sex with me. And that was when the bubble burst. That was when I realized that all of this stuff I had been going through, it had nothing to do with me accomplishing my goals. It had to do with, I looked good on his son's arm, and I looked like I would fall in line. And the less I fell in line and the more I questioned, the less I became part of the family, and the more that he pushed back and the more of the abuse and the manipulation happened. He would spend hours reprimanding me, and often it wasn't things that I did wrong. It was things that he just wanted to get out of his chest, and he wanted to be able to say, but he didn't do it to the other male instructors. He would do it to me. And I always do. I have a good example of this that will give you an insight to the type of abuse I dealt with. There was one master who I worked under who told this grandmaster that I was not doing my job when it came to cleaning the studio and that I needed to do a better job. So the first week, this grandmaster reprimanded me for almost 2 hours in front of all of the other instructors about how I failed at cleaning this studio and I wasn't doing my job, and how the master I was working under was disappointed in what I was doing. So he told me I needed to go to his wife, who was also an instructor, and I needed to ask her advice. So I go to his wife, who I considered a very good friend at the time, and I say, I don't know what to do. I'm doing this job and I'm being told I'm not doing it. And she says, you know, Ely, get a journal. Get a journal and write down everything you do every day. That way you can show the master what you're doing. Sounds reasonable, right? Right. Okay. So I do that for an entire week. So next meeting comes on that Tuesday and I'm empowered and I'm like, I did my job. So I sit down and he starts to get on to me and I pull out my journal and I say, look, sir, you know, this is what I did from this time to this time. This is the whole cleaning list I did every single day. And he says, I heard about you having a journal, Instructor Yates, because that was my maiden name. I heard that you had this journal and this master is extremely upset because he feels like you're trying to make him look bad by writing down everything you're doing in this journal. And then he reprimands me for another 2 hours for writing down everything I did, but not writing down what the master did because I was trying to make the master look bad. And that was the way that I spent every week for almost 3 years. There was no winning situation. It was very much, I was his punching bag. I was the only female instructor and I had no support around me. I was 6 hours away from anybody I knew. And that was how I dealt with everything. When I got upset because I wasn't getting a raise because he told me I was too emotional, he told me to print out my bank statements. And then him and his wife sat down with me with my bank statements and they made highlights every week of the things I shouldn't be purchasing.
That is insane that they would even have the audacity to sit you down and to go through your bank statements and to tell you what you should not buy with your money that you earn, that you work for, that she would tell you to write it down. That is insane that you endured all of this. And at what point was that pivotal point that you said, no, this is not going to happen anymore?
So right before it all blew up, it was about 2 weeks before I turned 21 when it all blew up. I had found out that this grandmaster had given everyone, all the male instructors, a raise, and he didn't give me one. And so I got mad and I went to him and I said, why didn't I receive this raise? And he said, well, I was going to give you the raise, but since you and my son are going to be married soon, you're going to commingle your funds and he needs to be the breadwinner. So I gave him the raise. So he gave his son my raise and told me I just needed to finish learning how to budget better because that was going to be what my job was once we were married. And I went home that night to my quote unquote fiance. I cried. I'd told him, I don't think this is what I want anymore. I don't want to be an instructor. This isn't what I signed up for. He held me that night, told me it was going to be okay if I wanted to find a job, that would be fine. And then the next day, his mom broke up with me at the local Denny's and he didn't speak to me. My fiance didn't speak to me for 3 months. His mom broke up with me and fired me that day at Denny's.
Oh my God. Okay. So the way I'm understanding, his mom did everything, came to you, talked to you, da 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 da. And I know you were probably shocked. You were in disbelief that all of these things were happening. Was that the point that made that shift in your life?
Well, when I was gone for that 3 months, my mom owned a car detailing business. So she also worked in a male-dominated industry and she owned the business. She didn't fuck around. She didn't mess around at all. She was like, you go, if you really feel like you need to go back because this is unfinished business, you go back, but you don't allow him to treat you the way he's been treating you. And so I went back very empowered. And the first day I spent 10 hours getting lectured about how much I needed to improve. I wasn't really having it. By this point, I was disconnected, right? I was like, you're full of shit, bro. I don't know who you are, but don't talk to me that way. So it lasted about 3 months, 3 months of that was probably the most horrific 3 months of my life. And finally it all, like, I ended up getting fired. I ended up actually getting fired, ironically, for sexual harassment because me and the other instructor had conversations about things like sex, about things like I was unhappy with my relationship. And so the grandmaster ended up firing me for sexual harassment and then pretty much making my name mud because now this other instructor, he had recorded one of our conversations without me knowing, and he had played it for this grandmaster. And I was completely humiliated. I was like, I walked away from martial arts for a long time at that point because I had realized that it didn't matter what I did, I was always going to be in the wrong. And then I spent, 10 years just kind of not doing martial arts for a while and trying to put it all in a box and not go back to it. And it wasn't until 10 years later, I was about 30, that I really decided that I was going to start training again. And I was going to open my own school. And that's how Pretty Hands came alive, was that I realized I didn't really need a martial arts school to empower women to learn how to protect their mental and emotional space just as much as their physical space. And so I decided to develop Pretty Hands as I went on my own healing journey. And I recognized all this trauma and abuse I had endured for what it was. Because up until that point, I was taught and I believed that it was all my fault, that I was the sole reason that all of these things didn't happen because I made bad choices and I was a bad person. And it wasn't until I went into trauma-informed EMDR therapy and I reprocessed these memories that I realized just how unprofessional and how abusive these types of highly controlled environments were for my mental health and me in general.
So if you could wave a magic wand right here, right now, what would you change in the male-dominated space that you worked in?
I would teach my earlier self how to set boundaries and recognize red flags. If I could change anything in the male-dominated industry, because I don't believe I can change men.
You're not. There's no way.
But I do believe that we can teach the next generation and women now to learn how to set boundaries emotionally, mentally, professionally, and where their line is. And if they're not going to be accepted at this table, let's build our own fucking table. Like, we don't need to change and accept abuse so that we can have opportunity. And that is something that I developed Pretty Hands, Hard Punches, so that women can understand self-defense from all aspects, not just a physical reaction. Because had I knew about protecting my mental and emotional space, I would have recognized the things that this instructor was doing that was highly inappropriate. He shouldn't have been talking about things like my intimate relationships with his son to all of the other instructors, or about my ability to cook or clean or traditional gender roles with these other instructors. Those now I would recognize as a complete disrespect and disregard for my own boundaries. But at the time, I was 18 years old. I was 19 years old. I just wanted to please him. I just wanted him to say, hey, I'm proud of you and you're doing a great job. So I disregarded all of those uncomfortable feelings in favor of doing what he wanted and trying to be better. When in reality, it was never going to work the way I needed it to work, which meant my goals were going to be put first. They were never going to be. My goals were always going to be secondary to what this man wanted for himself, his family, and his son.
That in itself is a lot of trauma to go through, being in an environment where you didn't feel that you could show up fully as yourself or put boundaries in place. So what was the first boundary you put in place moving forward?
I began to put boundaries for myself. Like, I did what I call, and I developed, is called the ideal version of you, where I sat down and I really thought about, what did I, Elicia Ybarra, want out of life? How did I want to show up in the world? And this was well before I developed Pretty Hands, Hard Punches. This was when I was going through my own healing journey. In 2020, I had quit smoking cigarettes. I had walked away from a lot of my toxic friends. And my boundary was, I'm not going to be around people and allow them in my life that don't treat me the way I want to be treated. And I didn't understand it at the time, but that was what the first one I set. And this ideal version of me really helped me understand what I wanted out of life. How did I want to be perceived as a mother, as a wife, as a woman, as a business owner? And so I have 5 questions that I go through with all my students that I went through with myself. The first one is, how do you want this ideal version of you to look? How does she look? How does her hair look? Does she wear makeup? Does she wear a t-shirt and jeans? She dressed to the nines in stilettos and a pencil skirt? I personally love sundresses. I never wore sundresses before. This ideal version of me, all about the sundress, my friend. And then how does she feel? Does she wake up excited to go to work every day and empowered to build a business? Does she wake up happy to see her friends, excited to be in her marriage, excited to take care of her child? And I realized for me that I wanted to wake up happy every day. I wanted to wake up excited to live life to its fullest. And that was something I hadn't been doing. I had just been surviving. And then once you have the how do you look and how do you feel, then I asked myself, what are her boundaries? What does she allow in her life? What are her time boundaries, her social boundaries, her budget boundaries, her emotional boundaries, her physical boundaries? And I sat down with a piece of paper and I began to write out my boundaries in this ideal version of me, because I took myself out of the emotion right now. And then after I figured that out, I went to, how does she handle her boundaries being disrespected, right? Does she just show up with a list and she's like, nobody's going to treat me this way. Here's my list of demands. No, she communicates from a place of love. I love you and I care about you and I want you in my life, but I don't like the way you're treating me. So how can we make this a win-win situation? She sets her boundaries from a place of love. And finally, once I had the confidence and I had my boundaries and I knew the way I wanted to be treated, I asked myself, who does she allow in her life? And I realized that there were people that were in my life that were never going to respect my boundaries because my lack of boundaries made their life a lot easier. And those are the people to this day who are not a part of my life. Even some of them are family, and that was much harder. I had to start very small with just like one friend saying I didn't want to go to a coffee shop. I'd rather go to a tea shop and build my confidence from there. But once I had that ideal version of myself, I was able to take myself out of the emotional, don't treat me like that, or don't say that to me, and ask myself, why? Why don't I want to be treated like that? What is this person saying that is making me feel this way? And why am I feeling this way? And I realized a lot of it was my own feelings of self-worth and self-value were so small that I was constantly craving validation from the people around me. So instead, I set boundaries to make myself feel confident. And now, I have an incredible marriage. Thank God my husband was very patient with me through this whole learning experience. I have an incredible family and I have very good friends, and I wake up happy to go and live my life every day. And that started with asking myself, what do I want out of life? And do I want to thrive or do I want to just survive? And for a long time, I was just surviving.
That is amazing. I love that, because that's one thing that we as women do. We feel we just have to get through. And you don't have to just get through anything. You get to show up fully as yourself and be happy with who you are, not who the world says you should be. That you get to smile just by the small things. If it's something small as making your bed every day, if that satisfies you and uplifts you and gets you to the next thing that you accomplish for you, then that's a win. I want to talk about your studio. I wanted to know, I know you have a goal of empowering 1 million women through self-defense. So could you tell me about that?
So right now I have multiple classes going on and starting all throughout Southern California. I'm collaborating with the gyms and local community centers in order to put my classes on throughout the week. I also am currently working on an online course so that people that are listening to me on podcast interviews like this one can do the course. And even if you can't physically go out and train, you can still learn the most important parts of self-defense, which are setting boundaries, having situational awareness, recognizing red flags, learning how to use your language, tone, and posture. And those are things that can be taught online. They don't have to be taught in a studio. And what I've realized when it comes to women's self-defense is women really need to understand and internalize the fact that they determine their own self-value and their own worth, and they are worth defending. And once you realize that about yourself, you can see situations for what they are. You can learn how to recognize danger. You can learn how to de-escalate. You can learn how to use your language, tone, and posture in order to make you less likely to be a victim. A lot of times perpetrators are out there, they're looking for a compliant victim. They're looking for someone who has, no self-confidence and is going to go easily. So the more confidence you show, the less likely you are to be attacked. And that is factual, and that's based on statistics. So those are the types of things that I'm really empowering women to learn, because once you have that confidence, it's much easier to find a self-defense class in your own area that you can continue to train at. And along with that, I do teach very basic techniques that you can practice at home with a family member or even your husband or your wife. And you can do things like a palm strike, right in their nose, right? With a palm strike. That's something you can practice on a pillow. That's not something that you need to go out of your house for. And I think a lot of times women get discouraged from self-defense because they think they're going to go in and see Chad the muscle man from the local MMA studio who has muscles everywhere. And that's intimidating. Like, when you're a woman and you're trying to learn self-defense and you go into a testosterone-filled, male-dominated, studio where it's all about physical fighting, women often don't want to learn that way. They want a safe space where they don't feel like they're in the middle of being attacked. And I've often found that the male-dominated and male instructor self-defense courses can be very intimidating, especially for anyone who's experienced trauma. Because if you've ever, been choked in an abusive relationship, and then you go into a studio and you're learning self-defense and a man begins to choke you so that he can teach you how to get out of it, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to be triggered. And then you're not going to know what the heck's going on, because that's exactly what happened to me. And I was developing the curriculum, and I am a martial artist. So I want to create, and I have created, a safe environment that is trauma-informed, where I have people around, including myself, who is trained in trauma-informed physical reactions, who is trained in trauma-informed self-defense, because that is what women need. Out of all of my time of talking to women, I have not talked to a single woman who has not experienced some type of abuse.
No, I believe it. That's why it's so important what you're doing, and I'm so grateful for you. Well, I'm not going to continue to keep you, but I have one question that I ask all my guests, because as you know, my podcast, I changed the name, and it's called Rooted in Your Confidence, because I believe that confidence isn't something that you chase, it's something that builds within you. And what you're doing is building confidence. So what I want to ask you, what I ask all my guests is, what does it mean to be rooted in your confidence?
For me, it's all about boundaries. Like, rooted in your confidence is knowing where your line is in every aspect of your life. You know what you're comfortable with. You know what makes you uncomfortable. And when you're rooted in that confidence, it means that you are willing to walk away from anything that makes you uncomfortable in a way that you're not okay with.
All right. Come on now. That is amazing. So could you tell my listeners where they can find you, reach you, tell them all the things about you?
Absolutely. My name is Elicia Ybarra, and I am across all social medias at Pretty Hands Hard Punches. You can also find me on my website, www.prettyhandshardpunches.com.
Elicia, thank you so much for sharing your story, your wisdom, your passion for empowering women. I thank you so much. And to the beautiful, if this conversation spoke to your spirit, here's what I want you to do. Hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss the next episode. Share with another woman who needs to hear this, because it's so important for us to empower each other through conversations like this that Elicia and I had today. And please connect with her. Her links are going to be in my show notes, and join the email family so that you can keep this conversation going. And remember, confidence isn't something that you chase. It's already rooted within you. Keep showing up in your truth. And I'll see you on the next episode of Rooted in Your Confidence. Sis, you don't have to twist, shrink, or hide. You deserve to be seen, heard, and valued for exactly who you are. If this episode spoke to you, make sure you follow, subscribe, so you never miss the conversation. And if you're ready to take this work deeper, take my confidence quiz. The link is in the show notes. Or book a session with me to start showing up in your career and life with the confidence you deserve. Until next time, walk through the door differently, show up, show out, be you, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Strong and fierce, taking over. No one can deny we're queens in our own right. Swagger on fleek, we're ruling the game, turning heads. Yeah, we're making our own name. Living free, we're breaking the mold. Unapologetically standing bold. Every picture we post, it's a story untold. We're inspiring souls, watch us unfold. Watch us unfold. Capture the moment, hold it tight. Every click, every flash, we're shining so bright. Through the lens, we're showing who we truly are.